10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 358. Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 358 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. New month, and this month we are continuing our series on getting started with odd time signatures, and this month we're actually going to get started with some odd time signatures and talk about some really practical stuff, and then we're going to look at some tunes in actual 5/4 and 7/4 and get started with the process of making ourselves comfortable playing over this kind of stuff. It's a long process, but I hope that some of this stuff will help you in getting there. So before we dive into the show, just wanted to remind you this is a listener-supported podcast, which means people like you support us with a small dollar donation every single month. And in return for that donation, you do get PDFs and audio examples of the materials from every single episode. And you can find out how to support us, how much, and all that good stuff by going to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, clicking on one of the Patreon banners, or you can go to patreon.com and search for the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. Either one of those things work. I want to give a quick shout out. We've got one new $5 patron. Thank you to Mike. And thank you to our new $3 patron. Thanks, Julian, for signing up and becoming a part of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson family. Thank you to everybody that has been supporting this show over the months and the years. We could not do this without you. So again, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, or go to patreon.com and search for 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. Okay, so let's get into what we're going to talk about today. So what we've talked about so far is starting to play some scale exercises in odd time signatures and some of the groupings that come along with these odd time signatures. And what we're going to do today is kind of the opposite of looking at groupings. We're going to attempt to play some actual vocabulary over the time signature of 5/4, but we're going to lose the groupings, if that makes sense. A really good way to learn about odd time signatures and the way that they function is by learning the different groupings that a lot of these time signatures break down into. Some of the stuff that we talked about on the last episode. Now what we want to do is we actually kind of want to break ourselves from thinking about those groupings now that we understand how they actually line up. One of the things that I think shows, and I know this from my own playing, one of the things that shows that somebody's a little bit inexperienced with odd time signatures is when you hear them playing in groupings all the time. And that's sort of the only way that you feel comfortable playing it over an odd time signature is to continuously hammer that grouping. So let's say that you're in 7/4 and your solo is just all of these 4 and 3 and 4 and 3 and 4 and 3. And the way that you're phrasing and the way that you're accenting is all really bringing out that grouping. That can get kind of old fast. So what we want to do is we want to look at some vocabulary just as we would do it in 4/4 or 3/4 without those groupings coming to the forefront as much as some of the other exercises that we did. And instead just kind of playing evenly across the bar, but knowing that in this case in 5/4, there's just going to be one extra beat from what we would normally do over 4/4. So let me elaborate on what I'm talking about a little bit more. So what we're going to be looking at, and if you want to pull out your PDF for this week, is we're going to be looking at a 2-5-1 in concert B flat in the time signature of 5/4. And basically what I have is I have 3 examples of 3 different lines that are meant to minimize the idea of a 3/2 grouping. Now you're going to notice the way that it's notated, it's going to be notated in that 3/2 grouping, especially when we're dealing with eighth notes. But our goal here is musically, content-wise, what we're playing, we want to minimize the feeling of that grouping. So let's look at the first line. And this one really minimizes the grouping because it's just running eighth notes. And what you're going to notice is the way that I'm playing this, you're going to notice that I'm trying to bring it out as little as possible. So let's check out this first example. This is a 2-5-1 in the key of concert B flat and 5-4. And this is just a straight up running eighth note line over the top of it. And see if you can hear how I'm actively trying to get away from that 3-2 grouping. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can hear my goal there was to make it sound like what I would play over 4/4. It just happens to have one more beat in the measure. So hopefully that sort of came across to you. And I'm really trying to de-emphasize the groupings. Okay. Now let's go a little bit further with de-emphasizing the groupings, and let's use some rhythm to actually purposefully obscure that 3/2. And it's also going to have the side effect of creating a more interesting line at the end of the day, because it's not like, oh, well, when we're playing in odd time signatures, we can't do a lot of rhythmically interesting things. We have to just stick to eighth notes so that we don't get lost. Ultimately, the goal is going to be to become as free as possible, just as free as you would be over 4/4, but over these more difficult time signatures. Now, of course, that's going to take like decades, right? I am 100% not as comfortable over odd time signatures as I am over 4/4. I don't know if I'll ever be, but the goal is to keep working toward that goal, and maybe eventually I'll get there someday. So if we look at example number 2, again, it's just a 2-5 in the key of concert B flat, but this time I've introduced some eighth note rests. And I've tried to place them in sort of strategic spots to both make the line more interesting and, again, to further obscure that 3-2 grouping so that it gets camouflaged a little bit more and just creates an interesting line. So let's check out what the second line sounds like on your sheet for this week. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so there's the one with some of those rests built in. And then the final line that I'd like to do for this week is now going to incorporate both some rests and some eighth note triplets, because that's another thing that I'm always using eighth note triplets when I'm playing in an even time signature in 4/4. Why not use them when I'm playing in 5/4, right? See, so I'm just trying to bring all of these elements of my language as an improviser. I'm trying to just bring them over to this different time signature. So now I'm dealing with eighth note triplets. I've got one in the first bar, one in the second bar, and one in the third bar. And I'm trying to incorporate these in a natural and seamless way. Okay, so let's see what the effects are as we incorporate some eighth note triplets. This is line number 3 on your PDF. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so there you have it. There's 3 examples of using language that's like what I would use over something in 4/4 or something in a more familiar time signature, but it is literally just played in 5/4. And I'm really trying to get my smoothness up, and I'm also trying to just further my comfort level in something like this. So you could write some more yourself. That would be a great thing for you to do. You could take the ideas that I've presented to you here. You could try to fit them into another odd time signature. Whatever you want to do, as far as you want to take it. Or maybe this is at the very, very edge of your comfort level right now, and that's totally fine too. Do what you can, just always try to be getting better. That's kind of the mantra here. It doesn't matter where you're at, as long as you're trying to improve your skills on a regular basis. So let me know if you have any questions, and we will see you next week. We're going to get started actually improvising over some odd time signatures next week. We're going to do that with a blues. All right, have a good week, everybody. Hope you're staying safe and healthy out there as usual, and we will talk to you soon. Have a good one. Bye.